Hey, in case you didn't know, my name is and welcome to my first anime review of Psycho Pass. I'm not counting the Madoka Magica one because it didn't really work. And this time I'm going to see if I can keep myself from breaking any YouTube copyright laws. Wish me luck. Psycho Pass takes place in a not-so-far-off dystopian future where omnipresent public sensors have been created to continuously scan the psyche of each citizen in range. These sensors measure the current mental state of each individual and judge the likelihood in which they are to commit crimes or exceed social norms, warning authorities immediately at each threat. This calculation is referred to as an individual's Psycho Pass. The Public Safety Bureau serves as this authority, where each officer is armed with a weapon called a Dominator, designed to arm itself only when it scans a person's Psycho Pass to be at a certain threat level. Akane Tsunemori has just recently joined Unit 1 of the Public Safety Bureau's Criminal Investigation Division. Together with her veteran partner Shinya Kogami, she investigates the city's most violent crimes, all the while struggling to comprehend the depth of the Psycho Pass's influence on humans and the society that they live in. My first experience with Psycho Pass was the English dub, which for the most part isn't too bad. Unfortunately, it's not very good either. Although most of the voice cast is experienced, the direction frequently leaves the characters talking in awkward, broken sentences, which for the most part are pretty distracting. The dub feels generally rushed, although the majority of the writing's decent. It's not a bad dub, so it wouldn't be too hard to watch in English, but with Psycho Pass's highly intense nature and excess in narrative, seriously, they have grand discussions over every moral thread. It can really take you out of some scenes. The Japanese dub is just generally better. I particularly like Akane's voice. She makes a nice shift between sounding so young and inexperienced and then so determined and cold by the end. The main antagonist, Makishima, however, is the opposite. He's portrayed by Takahiro Sakurai in Japanese, and this is actually the first time that I've been distracted by a Japanese voice. I've heard Sakurai in countless anime already, and his voice was so distinct that I had trouble separating him from himself. In English, however, Alex Organ, someone I've never actually heard before, makes the character his own. Even with the spotty direction, he's chilling and compelling with every line. It's solely for him that I recommend you at least give the English dub a look. The music in Psycho Pass is gorgeous. Yuko Kanno presents to us an otherworldly mixture of sweeping chorus and orchestral pieces and melodic, unsettling techno ambience. Usually they're kept distinct from each other, swapping back and forth dramatically, sometimes very quickly, in a polarized battle between the old and the new. It's not until the grand finale that these genres begin to meld into a single coherent sound, a representation of the clash between old ideals and new society. It practically goes without saying that Psycho Pass is gorgeous in art, character design, and animation departments. Most confrontations between our protagonists and the latent criminals they hunt down are a real treat to watch, especially in the final few episodes. The palette is extremely dark, with lots of bright neon highlights contrasted with some almost clinically white settings in times of peace. The whole city feels like something out of another world, a completely artificial world. For more reasons than just this, of course, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't attracted to dramatic color shifts like this. I guess I've always had a thing for big drama in my anime. Some of the female characters can suffer from a little same face, but their designs and personalities are always unique enough to pull them through, and I didn't really find it to be much of a problem. Normally, I'd loop all the characters into one section of the review, but considering how important a few of them are to proving my point later on, I'm just gonna talk about the side ones for now. Besides her main partner Kogami, Akane works with 4 others in her unit. Nobuchika Ginoza is the only enforcer in the unit at Akane's equal. Like her, he is perfectly sane and keeps an eye on the other 3 who, as hired criminals used to provide insight to other criminal minds, do most of the dirty work. Ginoza is initially presented as the overbearing, kinda asshole-ish senior who just can't seem to get off Akane's back. What makes him interesting, however, is his rather Shakespearean downfall in the face of the inevitability of his declining Psycho Pass. Growing up under a father who'd become a latent criminal, Ginoza made every effort to prevent the same thing from happening to him. But as the story progresses, we learn quite early on that his struggles are proving futile, and Ginoza, who is too encompassed by his job to consider any other escape, is forced to deal with the inevitability that his freedom will soon be taken from him. Tomomi Masaoka is the oldest member of the unit and is a representative of the world before the Psycho Pass. A regular cop before they implemented the Psycho Pass, he was unable to deal with the feeling of uselessness working behind the Dominator, which takes away any discretion he has when dealing with criminals. Masaoka fell prey to his stress and became a latent criminal. Now he's at peace with the system for what it's worth and still works as an enforcer. However, as Kogami rises against the system, Masaoka proves to be the only character who actively defends his decision, going so far as to risk his job. Shusei Kigari is one of the younger latent criminals who is identified as one at the age of 5. He's playful and friendly, but definitely has a distaste for the system that screwed him over before he'd ever really had a chance to live. Definitely one of the more simple characters, but the morals he presents are generally still interesting. In the very end, he does his job with a surprising amount of loyalty despite his frustration. The last member of Unit 1, Yayoi Kunizuka, is unfortunately one of the least interesting things about the show. She's serious to a fault, which wouldn't be so bad if she weren't completely devoid of character development. For the most part, she stays in the background, which makes it easier to forgive, I guess. However, she is the focus of episode 12, which does nothing but flush out her backstory. This might have been interesting if the episode hadn't come at such an inappropriate time. Immediately before, one of the most emotionally strenuous scenes throughout the entirety of the show takes place, which introduced both an unknown plot device and the antagonist. And then, out of nowhere, we're shot into this uninteresting side character's out-of-place backstory, which is never addressed again. The episode makes as if it's introducing a future plot point which never comes to a head and seems completely unnecessary. Although it provides an interesting view of how the latent criminals are detained, episode 12 is the most obvious filler of the bunch, and was the only place where I felt I wasted any of my time. With that done, let's take a dive into the real meat of this review. The story to Psycho-Pass is, at its simplest, a crime drama. It mostly follows Akane as she adjusts to the brutal system she's gotten so deeply involved in, and her relationships with her partners, many of which are considered mentally unstable by their Psycho-Pass readings. The main mystery plot, which follows a single antagonist, is peppered with other smaller cases, all related to or influenced by his scheme. These smaller antagonists, if a little unnecessary to the plot, are all at least interesting in their own right. If you like the macabre and tales of criminal insanity, then look no further, as most of these delicious baddies are their own creative breed of cruelty. And it's actually plenty of fun watching Akane and her team follow the trail of clues left behind. I'd be lying if I said that these episodes weren't filler, though. Most of them don't really have much of a connection to the plot, and don't really come up again later. I wouldn't say you waste your time with them, though, but as a whole, Psycho-Pass could really have stood to be a great deal of episodes shorter. It would have tightened it up just a good bit more. No, either way, the pacing's still really good. It's not really until episode 11 that the plot really comes into motion, and that is when Psycho-Pass starts to get good. As interested as I was with the characters and design, you've got to admit that Psycho-Pass doesn't present you with anything particularly unique initially. We've all seen it before. The plot twist regarding that supercomputer is probably my only real problem. I saw it coming from a mile away, and even then it still felt kinda ludicrous. Honestly, it's nothing too bad, but it felt sorta cliché compared to what Psycho-Pass had been presenting already, and I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but I'm pretty sure you could guess it based on a synopsis. Of course people are going to rebel against the system, of course it's going to threaten to break down, and anarchy will reign. Of course our protagonists are going to have to struggle to find a balance between the oppression of their mother brain overlord and the chaos of a lawless system. It's all been done before. Now, I'm going to tell you why Psycho-Pass made it work. The story's best conflicts come in pairs, Akane versus the system and Kogami versus Makishima, the main antagonist. Akane is special in that her Psycho-Pass stays extremely low no matter what stress she's put under. The reason for this is that she is extremely adaptable and fully understands and most of all accepts the system she grew up in. Akane is capable of questioning it, but understanding why it exists, as well as understanding that cruelty and insanity cannot always be explained. Akane is, most of all, a defender of the law, recognizing that we are not controlled by it, rather it exists based on our faith. She defends this faith, manifested through her attempts to keep Kogami from becoming a murderer. Akane is the moral ideal, a comfortable middle ground between what we believe we must do and what we really should. She struggles with Kogami and Makishima, who both stand outside the law, and tries to find the ideal balance to bring them back inside. Kogami himself would be a much less interesting character if Makishima weren't there as his foil. They are two of a kind, who both understand the flaws to the system that controls them and have the strength to stand up to it in defense of their ideals. Kogami protects peace while Makishima embraces chaos. Kogami protects the people both under and from the system while Makishima seeks to free them from it. They are polar opposites with the same desires, but methods so drastically different that one of them cannot exist alongside the other. It's for this reason that much of their confrontations and eventual climax are dedicated to the restoration of this balance. It's not chaos versus peace, but more anarchy versus skepticism. Neither know the right answer for finding peace with the system, and Akane's acceptance of it is inadmissible to them. Makishima especially is what made Psycho-Pass stand out for me. In reminiscence of Antoine Chigurh from No Country for Old Men, Makishima stood initially as an unstoppable force of chaos and death, manipulating everyone around him in his scheme, sometimes just for his own amusement. However, as Psycho-Pass progresses, his depth as a criminal, someone alienated from society down to a cerebral level, is what makes him so interesting. Makishima's alienation wasn't caused by any outside force that we know of. There's no tragic backstory, he simply didn't fit in. His brain works in a different way, clinical and detached, and because of an inability to feel emotions the way the rest of us do, he's excessively bored and a genius to top it off. The people in Psycho-Pass live like sheep, blindly following what they believe to be a simple computer's orders. Makishima, however, is willing to look beyond the facade. He doesn't proclaim himself a god or a leader of any kind. He trusts in the people that they will be able to build themselves up again once they're free. That's more than can be said for any of the protagonists. From his introduction, Makishima is presented as a criminal, something to be removed from society for the sake of normalcy. However, he is one of the few people able to choose his own path without restriction from a computer, and therefore express his humanity. He divulges himself in books from a time long before the Psycho-Pass, and seems to be the only character who'd grown up under the system with an interest in how life used to be. Why is it that the psychopath, the one without care for human life, the one who thinks in reverse to all norms implemented by society, is the only person capable of standing up against this oppression? Just because society calls him inhuman, just because he thinks differently, does that make it so? One could argue his actions throughout Psycho-Pass show more inherent humanity than many of the sheep that follow the system. When presented with a place where he could be around those that think the same way as he does at the price of his freedom, Makishima rebels. To him, his freedom is his last, possibly most important link of humanity, and he'll take any alternative to losing it. Makishima lives more vibrantly than most citizens under the system and seeks to offer that same definition of humanity to each and every one of them. Is living blindly without any personal control really that much better than anarchy? Is one human life more valuable than another? What exactly makes a human being? Are we more human just because societal norms tell us we are? Makishima as a character presents us with these questions and doesn't leave us with an answer. Maybe it's the individual's decision. Maybe society doesn't always get it right. Maybe we're all just a little bit crazy, and it's that balance that really makes up what we are. Psycho-Pass was produced by Production IG and licensed by Funimation in North America. The first season is out for purchase on Blu-ray, and the second season is started airing this October. A manga version produced by Shueisha and a light novel from Mag Garden are available as well.